Dr. Frans Cronje, it's good to see you in the flesh. Goodness.
It's very nice to see you.
It's been a year since we had our last interview. More than 100,000 people have watched it. So there's great anticipation, not least because a year ago, after being the arch bear almost on South Africa, you were quite optimistic. Now it's 12 months later, you're doing new stuff. Maybe we should start with that. You left the IRR and you've ended up at a small think tank.
Yeah, well, in part. I left the IRR in very good hands. So amazing people there, fantastic new CEO, John Endres. I was there for almost 20 years, so you must go before they ask you what you're still doing hanging around. I'm on my own now, run my own group, doing advice on things. And on the side, a small group of us have put together a little think tank. It's very small, very modest. It's not the IRR scale of operation. It's a small band of people who are very interested in what is happening in the country and in identifying solutions. It's called the Social Research Foundation. And what it does, it produces proposals on policy for the country, sends them out. It doesn't seek a great publicity or noise or the cut and thrust of public debate. Sends that out to key people who make decisions about South Africa, diplomats, businessmen. Any person who's interested is very welcome to read.
Apolitical?
Entirely apolitical. This is pure, this is straightforward, the policy solutions. And then a second part of it is what people think within the country. That, a lot of analysts don't stop to ask people, what do you want? And the South African public is, as ever, they've always saved the country when it's in trouble. They've always made the right calls at the sort of great T junctions that we reached. South African public is very astute. And if you're able to produce policy proposals and understand what people want, to see how the two resonate against each other, we hope that the SRF will have a small influence in helping South Africa through this transition that it's in at the moment. But your opening was, I was optimistic a year ago, very optimistic now.
Jeepers, Frans.
I think
there are people watching this saying, is it the same guy? I know he's lost his beard, or he's got a different beard now.
Look, I made a lot of calls that were right over the years. Yeah. And it was quite hard 15, 20 years back. We could see that the successes that had been achieved in the first decade as a democracy were starting to become brittle. And we could see just at the end of that Mbeki era that South Africa was set up for a harsh couple of years ahead. And that's very difficult because people saw the high growth of Mbeki. There was the stable business, government and labor sort of a tripod that existed, a budget surplus. Imagine that. It happened here. We doubled the number of people with jobs in the first decade as a democracy. Service delivery was looking pretty good. And we could, for various reasons, anticipate how this would go wrong. And so for about 10 or 15 years, we sounded pretty down in the face of undue and often ill-informed optimism. And that was very hard. It was difficult walking into those rooms. I walked into those briefings and I kind of thought, maybe I'll just tell them it's all going to be all right. But it wasn't, it would have been dishonest. And so we said, listen, we're headed for serious trouble. There was a lot of naysaying and you guys are pessimistic and nonsense. All that works in the world of analysis is that you look hard at the cold data and trends and make a call on that. When I spoke to you a year ago, more upbeat on where things are going.
That was just after the riots in the KZN.
Just after the riots.
In fact, days after it.
Days, yes. Days after. The same methodology that made us get those calls right a decade ago, 15 years ago, same methodology in place today. And I think we are actually looking pretty good. We'll go into trends, I'm sure, in our discussion. I think that we are near the point potentially of a transition of significance comparable to that of what we went through in the 1980s and the 1990s. Of course, historically, it's not as significant. But I think it's there, and I think I could make for you today a very sound case that South Africa's prospects are looking up.
And coming from somebody who's told it like it is, who has been attacked for his pessimism for decades. It seems to carry a lot more credence.
Well, it's quite. I wasn't pessimistic. We were realistic.
Well,
we knew what was going on, so we called it as we saw it. Now it's exactly right, and sometimes if I speak these days, the audience will say, it's a bit, ambitious. This, and are you sure you're not overdoing it? And I say, listen to where it comes from. This is the alleged prophets of doom, the hardcore conservative analysts. None of that was real, but that was the accusation. But on the same method, cold, hard analysis of the data and the facts, you can see the society changing, and the potential for change for the better is now very, very great.
I'm really keen to explore in a moment what happened on Monday evening with Ramaphosa's New Deal for electricity. But from your perspective, was there a watershed moment? Was there a tipping point that got you into a different way of looking at the future of South Africa? Or not looking at it differently, but seeing a brighter horizon?
Yeah, look, I think voter opinion is probably the key thing. We follow that very closely. The SRF outfit is very, very, very good on that. Lots of very deep, in-depth polling. And look, we could see it. I mean, with retrospect, you could see it earlier on. ANC, let's start somewhere. We become a democracy 25 years ago for the purpose, amongst other things, of if we ever reached a point where the country wasn't well governed to the satisfaction of its people, the people would have a recourse through the ballot box of changing things. In its first 15 years in power, the ANC does better than it ever received credit for, I think, and we saw ANC support lift as a consequence. Mandela takes it to 63% in 94. And lest we forget, under Thabo Mbeki in 2004, a decade later, it's at 69. It's 6 points stronger than Mandela. What's happened is the number of jobs has been doubled. The service delivery rollout is much more successful than Mbeki got credit for. And ANC voters, being normal people, everyone else, nothing unique about them or too unique, are voting on their material circumstances. And that was a critical first insight, because at the time, a lot of the opposition, critics of the ANC, are creating this myth of liberation loyalty voting. They're asking, why is the ANC still so strong when it's largely useless? It must be that its voters are fundamentally stupid and they vote on loyalty. They can't understand the facts. Now, that was wrong, straight wrong. The ANC voter had a very astute appreciation of the facts as they experienced living in the country. Their lives were getting better. The speculation then from us was, should that reverse, then we're going to see ANC voters desert the party. We then start to see the economic performance reverse after the ejection of Mbeki and the global financial crisis and everything that went with that. And at first you don't see it. The ANC kind of holds up. And you wonder, is the thesis right? Is there the flip side to this coin? But what I've learned is there's a lag time. There's a lag effect. The lived experience of weakening standards of living. The number of people with a job today in South Africa is roughly equivalent to the number when Mbeki left office. I mean, that is extraordinary.
More than a decade ago.
Yeah. The proportion of families with basic services, which improved sharply in the first, ANC comes to power, 50% of families don't have electricity. A decade later, 2004, it's 20%. Today, I can't remember what it is, but it's higher than 20%. So we begin to erode. And at first, the ANC vote seems sticky. It's not shifting. But when you drill deep into that ANC voting base and start to understand it, you see we could begin to see the potential for change. A disproportionate share of ANC voters were people aged 45 and older. Now, that made sense, because these are people who appreciated the change the ANC brought to the country.
They lived under apartheid.
They'd lived it. Younger people were not showing up for the ANC at all. I mean, a very small proportion of ANC voters were coming out of the youngest demographic.
Where were they going?
They weren't. They were sitting on
EFF?
the sideline. Well, no. I'll tell you where they went. They went into the protest world, the world of public protest. The number of protest actions in South Africa that were violent increased from 10% to 30% over the balance of the past decade or 15 years. And the net number of protest actions up several 100%. And that's not a bad thing, because, I mean, violent protest problematic, of course, it shouldn't be, but it is. But it's political participation. It's people who haven't given up. It's people who are saying we want something different. We want change. Now, political change always pursues the line of least resistance. It's like water leaking through whatever it would leak through. If you are North Africa, 15 years ago, young men pick up rifles to change the government because that is the easiest way to do it. If you have other options, so you're a free society, then the change will happen through civil action, protest, voting. Of late, last 5 years, but particularly, I'll give you the latest numbers come out of July, they're amazing. Of late, we've seen the lag effect of declining living standards and ANC support. Polled the ANC in depth over the last month, modelled for an election, so with a turnout scenario of 46. If you press ANC voters who are still voting on why do you vote for the party, what do you think of the party? They say to you it's useless, lazy, corrupt.
They still vote for it.
No, but I'll explain why. Okay. It's perfectly sensible why they do it. It's useless, lazy, corrupt. It abuses us. It's not what it was. Why do you vote for it? 8 reasons are cited. I probably won't recall all 8. One is it was great, and we remember that. The second reason is we hope Ramaphosa will change. Now, the key words are hope and change. Not that he continues. We hope he'll be different to what he is. It's such a disappointment. Third reason is the EFF is radical and violent and will bring chaos and anarchy and poverty to our community. So EFF support capped at about 12%. The DA it's conceded the DA is more competent and less corrupt. ANC voters buy these selling points of the DA correctly, because it's true. But there's a sense, I think, in how I read the data, that the DA's worldview will create a better society, undoubtedly, but one in which we will be left on the periphery forever. It might be a better periphery, but it's a bit alien and exclusionary. And that's why the DA support's capped at its present. It's polling pretty strongly now in the low 20s, so it's recovered completely from its a few setbacks. The new parties and coalition players just squabble with each other all the time.
Even Action SA?
Well, the perception of the Johannesburg coalition presently is negative, that the people just squabble all the time. And voters find it unbelievable that we could send someone to office and that they could not find it within themselves to get over themselves, to work together for our benefit. And what that means is they don't care about us. They're the same as the ANC, which spends its time squabbling and not caring about us. So let's stick with the devil we know, reluctantly, because of then the further fear that the smaller parties might be better, but they won't have the numbers to beat the ANC outright and govern the country. And the further fear from that, ANC voters actually tell you these days they are scared of change. They want it. They've given up. I think it's a useless organization they're a part of. But they're afraid of change because the vociferous criticism of the ANC from its party critics, from the external opposition, is taken, I think, at times to mean a criticism of the ANC voter, that you are the problem. You vote for these people. You brought state capture. You brought poverty and unemployment. And there's a fear that if this opposition comes to power, it will take retributive action against us. We might lose the little bit, the 350 rand that we get in this new grant that we get from the ANC. So ANC voters, what they're busy with is the ANC voters' relationship with this party is not the normal relationship that I think people that weren't ANC supporters have with political parties, certainly not Westerners. They'd invested hope and dream and aspiration that the party would liberate them, and they trusted it. And what they're going through now is the equivalent of a divorce. It's as emotionally difficult for them. They will concede in moments of clarity that this is not a good relationship. They'll concede they're doing really badly out of this deal. They'll accept on the logic of it that they need change and to take on something else. But it's hard for them to do that. It's hard for them to do that when they think that the opposition in government might not be any better. So why would I take on another partner? At least this one I kind of know how to deal with.
It's a very strong and powerful message to the opposition parties.
What the opposition needs to start to do, I mean, the opposition can do whatever it wants to do, and some of them will watch.
But if they listen to this message.
But they must do whatever they want to do. The point for the country as a whole is that the ANC voter is no longer an ANC supporter. They are far advanced down an emotional trajectory, informed of the hard facts of standards of living, that will culminate in their departure from that party and the ANC's decline and demise. What will happen then is that a plethora of opposition parties hopefully find their way to each other. Perhaps they'll delay the inevitable by squabbling too much, and there'll be some new startups. There are some on the way. Some I think are exciting. I think beyond that is that some of the ecosystem around the ANC of the first 15 years are very worried about the legacy being completely wrecked by the current administration. If they are sufficiently motivated to launch on their own, not a split or a splinter, but the ANC itself, I mean, it would have to be as audacious as that, they could do pretty well in a future election. The point of all of this is that we are well on our way, well advanced, the trend's unmistakable, to a future where South Africa will be governed by a collection of political parties, most of them, or majority of them, pragmatic and centrist, the biggest having 20 to 30% of the vote. A number having 5 to 10, maybe someone has 15, and a couple of smaller ones. And they're going to have to build coalition governments out of that. That is not unusual. This is Israel at the moment. This is Germany. The biggest parties in both those coalitions, Israeli one's a bit wonky at the moment, but that doesn't matter, is 25%. Bennett, when he was prime minister in Israel, his party had 7% of the vote. It's fundamental, this, Alec, because for 400 years here, at any single moment to date, one actor has had the ability to influence the political trajectory of the country. Sometimes it was a political party, sometimes it was something else. The Dutch, the British, the Afrikaner nationalists, the National Party, the ANC, whatever it was. That is over. And we're going to become a coalition country, where the new startups and successful opposition parties will leverage the pragmatism that has always been even at the heart of the ANC vote. If those parties find it within themselves to cooperate around sensible policies, then the prospects for recovery here are very, very good. There's disappointment around the world. I mean, it's not just in the West. I mean, even China and Russia are dismayed at the ineptitude that South Africa displays. If our global, our trade, diplomatic partners of all hues, we should have a non-partisan foreign policy, identify a capable government, the support, investment, interest we will draw will be sufficient, I think, to support financially, to a very great extent, a very fast South African economic recovery.
When we spoke a year ago, you were still of the impression that the ANC could win in 2024. How are you viewing it now? Lots happened in the last year.
Well, the hard numbers now is sitting at 46. Very hard to win off that. And if you remove the Ramaphosa factor, we vote for the ANC for many reasons, including we hope that he will change. If you press ANC voters and you say, oh, okay, you know, this Ramaphosa's thing, we understand. Did you believe there are two ANCs, a good one and a bad one? They say absolutely. You know, it's a sort of lazy media cliche. And you say, who are the leaders of the good one? And they say, well, Ramaphosa. And you say, okay, well who else? Stum. So if you remove Ramaphosa, the ANC goes to between 30 and 40. And the infighting and conflict then, I mean, will be tremendous, accelerated by the loss of patronage. You lose the jobs in the cities, the parastatals, the budget deficit, squeezing the cash flow that sustains the party. So the ANC can very, very quickly fall very, very far.
Post-December?
Can it win 50% in another election where these conditions are met? If the opposition parties cause public confidence in the coalition option to fall so far that the voting public sees the coalition as a comparable kind of option to that of the ANC, infighting, ineptitude, squabbling by distant people who don't care about us. The ANC's best option is to discredit the idea of coalition in the minds of voters. Maybe then it squeezes its way through one more time.
We've got the elective conference for the president coming up in December. Some very astute people within the party have been telling me that that is the last hurrah, the last rodeo, that there is going to be a disintegration of the party after that. Is that a feasible possibility?
It's feasible. I mean, we are seeing a disintegration of the party. Well, what does it need to sustain itself? So let's think of the hard stuff. It's run out of money to finance itself. It doesn't pay the salaries of the staff. I mean, imagine that happened here. I mean, it's pandemonium. It's run out of electricity to run the country with. It's run out of international credibility. I mean, everyone might be very polite, but from the west through the to the east, the sense of the ANC is astonishment at the ineptitude and incompetence of it. It's not a serious place anymore. When it came to power, it was carried on the shoulders of media and civil society. Heroic. Read the headlines on a Sunday. I mean, it's devastation. I mean, it's condemnation from the people that had held it in high esteem. It had public support, vast. Now I've given you the numbers. What is there that it has that would convince you that it's got another good decade ahead of it? The caliber of the people is not what it should be. When I was still in the IRR, at junior colleagues, I'd sometimes, to a newcomer, say, go and watch some, because you were probably born at the time, go watch some video clips of, debates in Parliament in the mid-1990s. I mean, the caliber, at the time we were critical of it, but it was at leagues of a different plane. I mean, Mandela State of the Nation briefings, Mbeki spoke about things, ideas, numbers. It was serious. This is serious. So if forget that it's the ANC I'm describing. Describe a business in this position. The management, there are assassinations that occur. Or a football club or something that I describe, and that you would be hard-pressed to think it's got a healthy decade ahead of it. So, no, I think it's in trouble. I think it goes. My sense is that at about 45%, what's seen as the sort of Ramaphosa camp probably decamp. And so this is futile.
So December is a big moment. This week, with the change in the approach towards electricity, up until now, the command and control idea has held. On Monday, that disintegrated as well. Is that hopeful for the economy generally, or am I making too much of it?
Look, installed capacity of 40,000 megawatts. We produced 25,000 on any decent day of the week. That's less than we were producing a decade ago. There's some private estimates out of the Eskom world that the shortfall within 10 or 20 years can be more than we currently produce. My own estimates are that a decade from today, even if the coal stations are saved, the shortfall will be about 20,000 megawatts. So that's 75% of current production.
So Cyril had no option, in other words.
I don't think he announced a plan.
He did. Supposedly, I'm going to be able to take the solar from my roof and sell it back to Eskom.
That's not the scale of base load that we need. We need 20,000 megawatts installed of serious base load capacity.
But if you let the private sector sell into the grid, as has been announced, and I was just using my little house, of course, is a small part of it. But if companies and other players can sell into the grid into the future, then they might invest.
Yep. Beyond all of that, that's all good. It's all positive. I don't have any problem. My own house powered by solar power. It's very good. And if I could sell the surplus, I'd be very happy. It's all fine. But it's wholly naive to think that this is a solution that's capable of seeing South Africa sustain the economic growth that we'll need over the next 20 or 30 years to take the current unemployment rate down to sub 10%. In the most telling comment in Mr. Ramaphosa's address was that if we get this right, so something along these lines, the quotation is, I won't recall exactly, we will be able to keep load shedding at the lower levels. This is not a plan that saves us.
Okay.
The plan that saves us is 20,000 megawatts of base load built in the next decade. Now, there are ways of doing that. One is gas. But at the moment, we don't have the gas and the pipeline, so it's a bit far away. A second one is coal. We have coal. We know how to do coal. Eskom is less an energy company than a coal-burning company. But coal is dirty and problematic, and our Western trade partners are going to punish us if we set up coal stations in the same way that they are doing now to save themselves and their energy emergency. That leaves a third option. It's nuclear. A big nuclear build, 20,000 megawatts, tendered by, you get the whole lot in, the Europeans, the Americans, the Chinese and the Russians. And the deal is you put the stuff up, no capex from South African taxpayers. You build it on your own. We won't interfere because it's disastrous. And we will guarantee offtake agreements for you. If that's done in the next 10 years, we get out of trouble. In addition to that 20,000 new baseload capacity, we do all the solar and wind stuff that one hears about, buying the stuff off the roofs. It's important. But short of that solution, which is actually the solution, we do not have an energy solution in South Africa today, and Mr. Ramaphosa did not announce one this week.
Got it. Okay, so the phoenix is rising. It's looking better. December is going to be pretty traumatic for the ANC, but 2024 will usher in a new dawn for South Africa, a true new dawn, with or without Ramaphosa at the head of the ANC. Is that, in a nutshell, what you're saying?
If they lose, he'll be, if they weigh down and the coalition is in command, Mr. Ramaphosa will have exited by then. The upside case is 2024, we get a broad coalition of parties to stump up 55% or so of the vote. They are able to work together on key issues. They realize that they possess certain segments of the voting market. And they are they're of course competitors too. I mean, one way I've put it to some of them is that, South Africa's big retailers are competitors. But the retail CEOs do not spend time insulting each other in business day or wherever it is, It's not, they're competitors, they get on well, they respect each other, they work together and they compete. And I think if the political culture becomes similar, of course it's my competitor, but actually collectively we all have a much greater responsibility to rescue a society in which half of people live terrible third world lives of poverty and desperation. I think the key ingredient is exactly that, the ability of South Africa's opposition leaders to work together. If you get that together with the kind of numbers we're seeing at the moment around pragmatic centrist policies, then we will be standing on the brink of a great reformation. And in the decade after that, you will begin to see recovery. And if it's well managed, and I know one input I'd add here is I think there's a very important role for the technocrats of the Mbeki era to come back, because they did well with what they got from the Nats. They 13 years from the Nat deficit to a budget surplus. Whatever you say about these guys, and they screwed up a lot, that was a hell of a thing. If that old Mbekiite, I don't want to, sometimes people say you shouldn't say it's the Mbekiite era, but let's say the first 15-year era's technocrats were able to create a vehicle also to be politically relevant in a future coalition, then I think the prospects are sound that we could anticipate a recovery here of the same nature, trajectory, intensity as what we saw in the 10 years after 1994.
Frans Cronje, with his new Social Research Foundation. Always good to have him here with us. I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.